real pleasure to be here, first of all. My name is Anthony Parker. I'm the Commissioner of Plant Breeders' Rights. Plant Breeders' Rights is a form of intellectual property protection for plant varieties. Probably the reason why we're discussing Plant Breeders' Rights right now is that the Government of Canada is proposing some amendments to the Plant Breeders' Rights law to bring us up to the UPOV 91 Convention. So it is a topic of interest these days. Well, plant breeding, first of all, is very important. It's a very important activity for society. Improved yields, improved disease resistance benefit not only producers, but the agricultural sector as a whole. So one of the things that we're working on right now is proposed amendments to Canada's PBR law to bring it up to the UPOV 91 Convention. And it's going to have two fundamental advantages. One is the provisions, the changes will improve access to the Canadian framework for intellectual property protection. And what that means is developers of new varieties are more likely to bring them into the Canadian marketplace. The second aspect is strengthening breeder protection, so providing for a framework that ensures that breeders are fairly compensated in the marketplace when they brought a new innovative variety and are selling it. So those are really the two fundamental aspects. Most developed countries already conform to UPOV 91. Canada is a handful of countries that are still party to the 78 Convention, and we expect that when we move to UPOV 91, we'll see increased investment, increased number of varieties coming into the Canadian marketplace, as well as increased diversity of varieties that are coming into the Canadian marketplace. And of course, this will benefit Canadian farmers.
What are the timelines that we're working with?
It's a little hard to tell. A lot of it is dependent on the parliamentary process. The bill C-18, just passed second reading in June, just before Parliament recessed for the summer. What we expect is to see the bill undergo thorough examination in the Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food in probably early October. Then, of course, it would have to go to third reading and then be moved up to the Senate. So it really depends on the parliamentary process. No one can really anticipate right now. It might be before Christmas that we see royal assent to the legislation. It could be later. It's a hard question to answer.
Why is UPOV 91 controversial?
Yeah, I think it's controversial. I think anything that has to do with intellectual property protection on plant varieties or any forms of life tends to be controversial in nature. People have very opposing views on that. But you have to remember, in the case of the UPOV framework and Plant Breeders' Rights Act, it's very unique because it's only around providing intellectual property protection for plant varieties in a way that balances interests. So this idea of fair compensation and ensuring that rights are preserved for the breeder, but also understanding that the agricultural environment is very unique and you have to balance those interests with the farmer. So things like the farmer's privilege, ensuring that farmers have that right to save and reuse seed for as long as they wish to of a PBR protected variety until they decide to use something else. That's very important because we know, especially in Western Canada, there's a high reliance on using farm-safe seed for productivity. So it's those aspects of balance that are important in the legislation. But of course, as I indicated, anytime you're talking about intellectual property protection, especially when you're talking about life forms, then it tends to be controversial in nature.
Okay.
And perhaps one of the misconceptions is that there will be increased liabilities for farmers with introduction of UPOV 91. That's not the case at all. There's no changes to the mechanisms for seeking compensation under UPOV 91. It continues to be the same as in the current PBR Act. If you believe as a breeder someone's infringed on your right, it's a civil court system that you would take it through. There is one change, though, in respect to brown bag seed, which is a legal sale of PBR protected varieties. Under the old regime, it was simply the seller who would be liable. So if someone infringed, the breeder would try to address that with the seller. Under the changes, it's both buyer and seller who become liable. So the best way to protect yourself and really in principle support continued plant breeding in Canada is ensure you don't engage in brown bag seed sales. That denies the breeder an opportunity to collect the royalty. And very important, it also denies many breeding programs a source of revenue to continue their breeding activities. So,
Do they need to be
it's-
aware of moving forward?
you know, you don't realize how much like universities depend on that source of funding to continue to be involved in breeding activities. It's an important source of funding, and when you infringe on that, you're denying that source of that revenue. So.
Mhm.